afternoon. We're on recording?
We're good, yeah. You have to.
Yeah. Well, good. My name is Alex. I work for Arctic Wolf. I'm one of the technical engineers. Well, kind of an oxymoron, I suppose. I'm one of the engineers who actually understands how the system works, as opposed to just a salesperson. So, although my presentation today isn't going to be too much in depth, really the idea here is to cover some of the principles and hopefully shed some light and maybe give some light guidance as to why services like ours in this climate today are frankly necessary, and give you some idea of what it is that we do at Arctic Wolf. So, real quick check. How many of you have heard of us ever? So I was talking to my KIS friends here and also my colleagues at the booth, and it turns out that roughly half the audience, people that came through our booth, have no idea who we are, which is, I guess, an improvement that last year before that number was close to zero. So I guess we're doing something right. So let's talk about Arctic Wolf, but really, rather than doing that, talk about cyber risk in general, ways to address it, what does that actually mean on practice. Starting with doom and gloom here, this is the industry's view of our current state and situation in cyber in general. Probably the scariest one is the one that Verizon publishes annually. It's down in the middle there. You have this, seems to be growing at higher pace. That percentage keeps climbing. So really the idea there is to reiterate to people like us in this industry that things, unfortunately, are not getting better with respect to overall security posture, and number of breaches is growing. What's interesting about this, I'll say that the 2022 report, which I haven't seen myself, but I'm willing to bet $20 that these numbers, the number of breaches, which has been climbing steadily, is actually going to be a lot less, which is kind of a good reason to rejoice, until you realize that it has nothing to do with the fact that our cyber posture has gotten better. Simply because of the conflict in Eastern Europe right now, the hackers on both sides are too busy hacking each other as opposed to us. So that's going to change at some point. So the other two pieces here, the one that I found very interesting is the FBI crime report on phishing, smishing, farming. Really, all of them indicate attacks on identity, attacks on credentials. The crazy rise just over the last couple of years in that specific area of attack or interest from malicious groups is indicative, because not only is this kind of the door opener for further attacks, it's something that within that community it's cultivated and resold. So you don't have to be a full-on breach expert, but if you're good at social engineering and getting people's attention, you can get credentials, you can resell them for profit and just kind of call it a day, right? So that's a whole cottage industry there. And that translates into this IBM Securities report. The fact is, if you have credentials, you kind of, to some degree, have keys to the kingdom. And what this shows us here is the impact of having those doors opened by somebody who shouldn't be having these keys. Those numbers are pretty steady, really, because I would say the internal workings of companies year over year don't change. If you look at the typical attack pattern and detection and then response to that attack, what we're seeing, and this is pretty steady, has been for years like this, it's measured in months. The time it takes to oftentimes accidentally identify, or when you are realizing that you have a full-on breach. There's a lot of data loss, a lot of nasty things, oftentimes that are really impossible to ascertain to the fullest degree. But really, 75 days of recovery time that are responsible for this, right? So that's a lot of money for a company of, let's say, sub 500 employees to lose in a course of a couple of months just to get their business operations back, right? So it's a pretty sad state of things. Again, don't get too gloomy over it, but this is really what the cold, hard numbers are telling us from the industry. This one is something, kind of a new spin on the same problem, really. So this is the same problem really viewed through the eyes of cyber insurance, security insurance underwriters. Um, they also went through kind of a transformative period of their own as well. 5 years ago, getting a cyber liability insurance for somebody who worked in cyber insurance or in the insurance business was just music to their ear. They wrote them left and right. It was the easiest way to basically cash in. It's like writing mortgages back, pre 2009, right? Everyone was doing it, and then chickens came home to roost. So we're looking at the situation where that rise of attacks on and successful attacks on the enterprise is now hitting them where they have to pay out on those policies. And so, of course, insurance companies are very good at counting their own money. So a couple of things that we see, and this is something that I'm encountering as a vendor in pretty much all of my conversations, where a year ago, if I was talking to somebody like you in this room, the conversation would be pivoting around, hey, there's this real threat, you need protection, how can we do this for you? Today is changing to, yeah, we know all that, thank you, but I right now cannot get my cyber insurance renewed, which is really the most important thing for me, because if I can't renew it, I'm a supplier for XYZ, I cannot be their supplier anymore because I'm not insurable. So that challenge is real. It's not something that IT staff necessarily is responsible for, but it is a real problem, right? And it's a different side or facet to the same problem. So, and this is the view of the same problem from the eyes of someone like me, whose job is really to help address and fix it. So most of the conversations we're having, and kind of once you dig deeper into the situation, I would say could be categorized as two states, right? State one is companies simply don't understand, for a variety of reasons, due to complexity or just inability to fully comprehend it, understand what their security posture looks like. It's one thing to have security manual written, it's another thing to actually have it implemented. And then there's another state of being, if you would, and that's you understand what the problems are, you just can't implement anything sizable or sufficient to protect yourself. And that second problem is something that we strive to address for our customers. So as somebody inside an organization, typically if I'm in one of those two states, specifically if I'm trying to implement prescribed security controls, I'm looking at things like security audits that are conducted, perhaps it's a matter of policy. I realize that they're not adequate. A lot of projects around security are, just that, tactical projects. So it's a very easy thing, or at least it's a natural thing for IT to buy a tool to solve a problem. And what we're dealing with here is not something that can be solved by throwing a tool at it. Also, when you start talking about cybersecurity, you're dealing with fairly complex items here. There are frameworks, various security frameworks, compliance-related security frameworks, and it's very hard to translate random tools that you're purchasing. How does the purchase of a firewall product relate to a specific framework? How do you check the boxes, and how do you make it work right? So, and then lastly, and this is the big one, not being able to really understand what will this do for me in the next 6 months? What's my goal, and what is that progress? How do you even measure that? So, really, this is not working out for majority of the customers. And so even if there's a will to do that, and let's say there's some budget allocated to providing security operations, typical way of doing that is still, I would say, kind of, old school, in a sense that people are more inclined at buying specific either software products or hardware products to address problems that are frankly operational in nature. And anytime you hear the word operational, to me at least, it implies people. So it's process and people to execute that process. That is really the hardest thing to crack. But if you were to do this yourself, kind of the typical playbook, I put it there because oftentimes we end up talking to customers who actually had spent a year and X amount of thousands of dollars trying to do something like this themselves. They understand what the problem is. They understand that they need to build a proper security operational presence within the organization. And they get this vendor list, some of our tool products, some of our security partners, and then they go down and try to patch something together. There's a lot of questions here that pop up right away. Some of the bigger ones are obviously, how are you going to pay for that? Are you going to be able to man it and retain it? Frankly, this is the big one. If you build a wonderful operational environment that is manned by 2-3 individuals, if they choose to depart, what does that do to your shop, right? It's always a problem. And then what can you expect of that? What is the SLA? Are you actually able to deliver on the promise of protecting your organization? All of those are very hard questions to answer, and frankly could be overwhelming. So when we talk to people who try to do this, the very first thing we ask them to do is just kind of pause, take a breath, and just kind of reset your mind of reference or frame of reference. First of all, forget about buying tools, at least for the time being, and look at this as an operational process, right? Like you're trying to fix a process first and foremost. And then focus on these few things. First of all, every customer, every company out there has certain amount of security tooling already implemented. It may be gappy, it may be outdated, insufficient, you name it, but I can tell you with a degree of certainty that just about every single one of them could be rampant, right? So step one really would be to make sure that the tools you already spent money on and that are already implemented are done so to the best degree possible. So one of the key concepts here is to unify visibility of telemetry from these tools. So, and that's something that proper security vendors should help you both on the configuration side, and then also on validation of the fact that the tool is working to its best. Focusing on the outcomes is also important. It's very easy to get wrapped around kind of project mentality. Like I'm going to deploy this firewall, right? And this is going to be my outcome. That's not the outcome, right? The outcome is I'm going to protect my perimeter, or will I? So ask those questions, and kind of boil down some of those complex problems into perhaps glue them into one simple answer, which frankly, as you'll find out, is finding the right partner on this journey. So building resilience is important. One of the things that the industry in general has been slowly pivoting to, and it's more of an acceptance. If you go back to that very first slide when we talked about how many breaches and how they're growing, there's really no reduction in breach statistics in sight. One of the things that you need to accept as security leader or information security leader within the company is that, an event like that is inevitable, right? It's going to happen. No matter of controls, protective controls is going to protect you. Just accept that. Hopefully it won't happen to you anytime soon, but it will. So really the question is of resilience. What happens when the breach occurs? Are you going to be down for half a day? Or are you going to be recovering for 75 days like the statistics show, right? So this idea, this acceptance of it's going to happen, figure out how to not let it affect you dramatically is really where the industry is going. And, there are different ways of doing that. Different approaches to kind of, there's a whole sub-market, if you would, of vendors and companies that pander to those needs, if you would. Not surprisingly, Arctic Wolf down there. I'm invested in the slide, so those oranges are mine. The approach that we feel is the winning one and really the one that merits spending most of your time and attention on is an idea of a properly managed SOC, or SOC as a service. In our case, Arctic Wolf, we're the ones providing this functionality. You will see a lot of very familiar names there or technologies, XDR, MDR. Really, a lot of them are evolutions of tooling or a marriage of tools with some kind of managed service component. There's a lot of merits to them on the technical side, but I think the operational component is still lacking in most of them. So again, take it with a grain of salt. I work for Arctic Wolf, so my belief is that operations need to come first and tools come second. So this idea of a SOC or managed SOC or SOC as a service, what do we really mean by that? What is it that the SOC should be doing for an organization? So first and foremost, that classic, Hollywood instilled idea of a security operations center where you have this nicely dimmed room with bright screens and neatly dressed hands-on people monitoring for attacks and respond to them. That is 100% true, by the way. That's exactly what all of us practical look like. I mean, if you just pick up some of those specimens on the back there, they're like off the magazine cover. But the reality of it is, it's just it's a grueling, detail-oriented work. And if you guys have ever spent any amount of time like reviewing logs, just if that was your job day in, day out to review logs or do log analysis, you'll know exactly what I'm talking about it. So it is a kind of a thankless job, right? But it's something that needs to be done. So when you build a SOC, it's something that needs to happen, but it needs to happen in a way that the people don't burn out, that the people are actually enjoying it to a degree possible, and that they have some kind of a career path at doing it, right? So there's just a bunch of things that happen behind the scene to make it. That's why SOCs of 4 to 5 people in size never really last, I don't think, because people feel landlocked in those positions, and it's just not a good feeling. So that's one function. That's probably the most obvious one. Vulnerability management. This is really where you look at the lay of the land. This is managing of the assets and then understanding how well configured those assets are. Are there any gaps in the coverage for those? Compared to that threat detection and response function, you can think of it as a ounce of prevention to the pound of cure that you do on analysis of the logs. For anything that is procedural, well, the process itself needs to be maintained and upheld. So proper ticketing, the way to record, if nothing else for GRC purposes, for compliance reasons, show what's been done, how it's been done, but also ticketing implies that when somebody in the SOC discovers a worthy incident, they have a specific clear communication path to somebody in IT. They need to know who this ticket needs to go to. So building that and making sure it works is an important part of that. Another piece here that we believe belongs in the SOC, although oftentimes in majority of the organization, it falls under HR, oddly. This idea of a continuous security awareness training. So the notion there is that you have X number of employees in any organization, and they can be really either your worst nightmare from the security standpoint or your best asset. So the idea is to take those users and convert them into somebody who can make your life as an engineer in the security operations center survivable. So this continuous security training oftentimes is conducted by HR. You have those annual training programs, which are absolutely zero efficiency with respect to security. The program that exists that has to address security, that addresses security concerns, needs to be ongoing. It needs to be engaging. It needs to happen regularly, like weekly or bi-weekly. So that is something that a SOC needs to provide. And lastly, and this is the piece that is not very tangible, but also important, is this idea of a security journey. So security journey is, let's get out of this rut, this interrupt-driven mess that we're in right now, and kind of step back and realize where we're going with this. Because if you don't have a vision for any endeavor, be that security operations or business in general, you're not going to go anywhere. So that is something that is a tall order to build. If you've built those and you have the ability to build an operations center like that as a customer, you probably already are using it. Most of the organizations that we encounter, especially in the less than Fortune whatever size, are struggling with this. And we come into this situation with expertise that is replicated and reproduced across over 3,300 customers. So dealing with customers anywhere from kind of mom and pop shops measured in dozens to multi-thousand organizations, having this operation that can scale for them and plugs into their environment. So this concierge security team is our tagline. This is the idea of personable, assigned security team that a customer can call on. It's a team that acts as an extension of your own security or IT team, and someone who you actually know on a first name basis. Every single customer or every single organization that becomes our customers gets one of those teams, and it's usually 2 to 3 individuals that are assigned into that function. What does this look like from the Arctic Wolf standpoint? What is it like? How are we structured in the first place? And in order to be able to provide that type of service at scale that we've provided that, we quickly realized pretty much from the day we started building out the system, is that telemetry is king, right? We're supporting hundreds of customers today. The last thing we want to tell, or the message we want to send to our customers, is that telemetry is expensive. Processing your telemetry is expensive. We're going to bill you for X amount of volume of that telemetry. That's a non-starter. So we built out our platform that allows us pretty much unlimited, within the reason, ingest of telemetry from our customer base. And also that kind of unties our hands with respect to what kind of telemetry we are welcoming. So in our platform, we are looking at anything that pretty much all the technology tooling outputs that span from the identity systems, endpoint, network, cloud, human behavior, things that we generate using some of our own tooling that we deploy within customers, and feeding that into a platform. So this platform is kind of where think of that as the internal SaaS application that Arctic Wolf uses, or Arctic Wolf SOC staffers use to provide certain services. Now, from standpoint of you and KIS as a partner, what is it that you guys are buying? Like where do I pay and what do I pay for, right? What does that look like? So that is organized into specific service offerings. There are nominally 3 services that we offer. Detection and response, vulnerability management as a service is known as a managed risk, and then security awareness service, it's that educational component that I talked about. Straddling all that is our in-house incident response capability. So the idea here is that with all these 3 initial services that I showed there, we're trying to prevent a breach or serious incident from happening. But as I said, it's going to happen inevitably. And really the whole conversation about resilience should include an incident response plan, right? Or breach response plan. So we have a full capability to respond and frankly recover customer that has been affected by the worst of the attacks. Quite a few customers, fortunate for us, very few of them, if any, come from our existing customer base. Quite a few of them are just walk-ins. This branch of our business gets, direct referrals, people coming in saying, I cannot log into my systems, right? Help me. So, and then everything that follows from that, down to ransomware negotiations with the malicious parties. At the end of the day, most of those post-recovery, those organizations are very likely to become our customers. We also have a financial program that if you are a customer, you subscribed into these programs, and you do have a serious incident that you're now going to your insurance company, you're asking your insurance company to pay for it, we feel like we need to have a financial stake in it as well. So we actually put some money where our mouth is, and think of that as supplemental warranty that in case of a severe incident will allow us to offset some of your expenses, especially considering how limiting the cyber insurance coverages are these days. A couple of words about the people who actually make it possible at Arctic Wolf, the SOC teams. So we have, the way it's structured is we have what's referred to as a triage team. So those are the people, those handsome people behind the monitors, right? They're the ones that operate 24/7. They're the ones that are reaching out to customers and giving basic guidance and response. But then for every single customer, we have this assigned name team. They often come in toward the end of an incident, but they're also there to kind of chaperone our customers on this security journey. That number of 400 plus engineers, plus it's a thicker plus every time I look at it. We're actually inching closer to 900 right now. So it's obviously, if you're a security engineer or know somebody who is aspiring to become one, let us know. We're hiring all the time. So that's a big part. Really, that's the secret to our success, if you would. For any given customer, what does that interaction would look like if you were to become a customer tomorrow? Oftentimes the question is asked is, okay, so you're doing this service for me. What does that mean for my time, right? Like, how much interaction for me do you need? How involved are you in my operations day to day? What can I expect? So this is a statistical slide on, it's actually a fairly large organization, 2,000 users. So it's not a small company, quite a few servers there. 2 sensors indicating that we're looking at their egress sites, basically 2 locations, 2 points of presence where they go to internet, and then telemetry generated by all those assets. On a scale of 1 week we're expecting for a company of this size to ingest and process close to 500 million of observations. An observation, basically think of it as an event in a log. So that's a lot of events, and they span just variety of tooling and types. So anything from Active Directory event to third-party telemetry, EDR tools, people logging in and failing to do so, right? All those things coming in, they're getting processed, and out of those events, when they're getting correlated and the machine detections are applied to them, there's a significant, I would say, multiple orders of magnitude reduction in noise. Right? At that point, the next stage here is investigations. So you go from 400 million observations to roughly 2,000 investigations. And when we say investigations, we imply that it's actually human-led investigations. So out of those massive numbers of telemetry, of events, come out some actual highly suspicious events that need to be investigated by humans. And then out of them, subsequently, there are quite a few, vast majority are getting suppressed as noise and proved out. So what does that mean to you as a customer? For a company of this size, on average, you can expect to hear from us on 1 to 2 incidents per day, which, considering the scale and the size of the organization, it's actually quite excellent. One of the commitments here for us is that we are, those few incidents, when we are reaching out to you, especially if they're of high criticality, we definitely require your attention. And the way we structure it is in such a way that we, the actual outreach and communications tree, if you would, is built in a way that, we know exactly how to go to directly to the people who are responsible for that. It's part of the onboarding process where we specify that. And don't be surprised if you hear from us by phone. Sometimes that's what it takes to get the response quickly. Concierge security team is something that at the end of this process, they look at a particular incident or history of incidents and see if there's an opportunity to learn and improve this organization long term. So those outcomes, it's not just the fact that we're talking about that. It's what did we learn from it and how did we make this company stronger and more resilient over time?
Excuse.
Yeah.
So 2 questions.
Please.
One, the reporting structure there, are we as a customer able to view any of the information at the higher level, say the larger, like not actionable items, but the section before that? Are we at least able to see what systems might have had reports on it? And are we able to specify as a customer if you see anything on a particular system or anything of a particular variety, that we make sure those are highlighted notifications?
Basically customizing it and tuning it to
Correct.
your specific, yes. And so typically this is what happens if you look at this timeline of, let's say, a year of experience with Arctic Wolf, right? This first 90-day period tends to be pretty vibrant for the reasons you just explained. We walk into this environment where we really don't know anything about the customer. So we want to learn as much as possible, not just by looking at the telemetry, but also what is it that you do, what industry you're in, what are your goals? And then what that means is that we are interacting with you probably weekly. The onboarding process itself, our goal is to complete the actual onboarding process in 1 month or less. But then once the telemetry starts flowing, there's all kinds of questions that come out of that. And it's a cooperative process, like you said. There is a portal, customer-facing portal, where, so rather than showing those billions of lines of telemetry, which, by the way, if you want to, it is your telemetry. We have the ability to give you a raw search through that. Very few customers are excited about doing that. They would much rather have either a nice report that summarizes that, or if there's an incident that actually does something with that telemetry, have that telemetry presented to them in kind of a guided manner. So be that through the portal or in person, right, when you actually deal with an incident with an Arctic Wolf employee. So this is what happens in the first 90 days, right? There's this initial acceptance. We go through the architecture review. We go through review of configuration. I cannot tell you how many times I talk to customers who are signed with a service provider, basically a competitor or someone like us, right? And I ask them, so when was the last time you talked to them? And they're like, when we signed it, right? So, okay, so how do you know what they're doing for you? Like, how do you even know that they're doing anything for you? Well, they install this equipment, they're sensing our network traffic. Okay, are they doing anything with that? And then, oftentimes what I hear, and this is even a bigger sin for a vendor, is stuff like, well, I'm a new CISO of this company, I just started, and we've had this vendor, it predates me. I just found out that since February of last year, half of this telemetry that we're paying them to receive, they never even configured it, right? Like, how do you even operate like that, right? So those are very important things to miss, very big ones. So we're very diligent about that process early on, make sure that not just the telemetry is flowing, but sources of telemetry are configured right. If we see some funny logs from a firewall, we will actually sit down with customers and do what we refer to as a spider. Spider is our shorthand for a posture review. So we'll actually sit down, put time on the calendar with the customer and look with them at how their firewalls are configured, right? It's not just for the sake of better telemetry, it's also for some obvious gaps. And so those are very prescribed. You can see that there's the very popular one is Active Directory, because everyone has a mess in there. So we attempt to kind of untangle that. Endpoint configuration too. So 90 days pass, and then you have this kind of steady state, right? Hopefully we've addressed some of the low-hanging fruit security-wise, but then going forward, at the very least, even if the customer is reluctant to, or they're too busy or whatever, they just want service done for them, they don't interact with us, we insist that we spend time with them face-to-face at least quarterly. And during those periods, we bring our findings to them, look at the things that we see in their environment, and then recommend some additional follow-on security reviews. So those are things that come with the service. It's important to point out that nothing here is costing anyone extra money. So it's not uncommon that a brand new customer that we've just onboarded and we're now seeing their telemetry, they are basically on the brink of basically the breach occurs a week after we onboarded them, right? And then we spend another 2 weeks of our time helping them recover from it. They burned through that contract probably in the first week of that engagement. But that comes with the territory, right? That's just, we will never leave a customer behind if it's becoming a loss. And there's no supplemental expenditures or professional services contracts. We also have a strong belief in constant interaction. So your named concierge security team will spend time with you monthly looking at those things. So again, some customers like it. Some customers actually like more frequent cadence. I know of a customer who likes to interact with their Arctic Wolf team twice a week, on Monday and on Friday. It's very quick, very regimented call, but they just feel much better about state of things that way. Others, we do it on a monthly basis, and during those engagements, these are some of the things that we do. Again, if you can probably go and hire KIS to do some of those things as a PS service, we do it as a part of our service delivery. Really, the idea there is that if we conduct these activities in your environment, A, you are protected. B, it's less work for us because you're not as chatty anymore, right? So it's a win-win. And we deliver on our promise of that long-term security and security journey. I have an example of an actual security, like an incident. This is the journey part is interesting, but kind of the eye candy is like a specific detection or specific incident. If you guys are interested, we can talk about that. You guys want to see what a ransomware attack looks like? Kind of
Yes.
for it?
Yes.
Let's do that. So sometimes, as I said, it's 100% expected that somewhere during this engagement, you're going to have a bunch of small incidents, and you're probably going to have 1 or 2 serious ones, right? Which we intend to detect to stop from happening. But let's pick on this ransomware. So in this example, we're looking at a ransomware attack that is, and I believe this was a state and local government customer of ours. So anonymizing this to the degree possible, basically here's a timeline. So 5:23 a.m., again, keep in mind, state, local government, ain't nobody working 24/7, right? So we are getting detection in the Active Directory, which is, it's anomalous, it's not really malicious, but the detection is that there are unusual logins with a particular user account on multiple systems. So soon after that, and this is a big one, within minutes of that, through our sensor, which is basically a perimeter device that looks at the traffic and has the ability to understand comings and goings, basically net flow, if that means anything to you guys, of communication from that particular site. So we're noticing traffic that's indicative of a control and command traffic. And couple of things here. The IP address there is a known malicious IP address. It's attributed to a specific group that leverages PowerShell and Pyre exploitation. So at this point, if the customer had an advanced, like an EDR product, or even if they had our own agent deployed there, or fully deployed, this would have been, detectable. So in this case, you have a very solid reason to worry, right? So you have an investigation that gets triggered. At this point, this is when the humans kick in. So you, based on the severity of this investigation, this goes to the level 3 triage, urgent status. No matter the time, this is a big deal for us at this point. So the investigation goes through. We really confirm what the machine's already told us. Probably what the analyst is doing at this point is pulling all the logs for the time period, maybe a few minutes preceding.
I just wasn't sure if you were going to interrupt you while you're presenting.
Sorry.
So at this point, this is human intervention. You're not using AI.
So the machine piece of that happens up to this point. And then think of that as validating whether a human should spend time on it. When it crosses that threshold and humans are actually investigating, then they're using investigative tools and primarily their brain and the technology that's available to them. So it's a hybrid way of doing it, I guess is the way to describe it.
Okay, so at that point, what action do you take while you're investigating? Do you have
What's the response look like?
correct? Yes.
Yeah, so let's talk about that. So it would vary based on the tooling and the setup of this organization. So we have a component. So first of all, the customer gets ticketed, right? And if you'll notice here, there's a bit of a gap here. Up until time, we're pretty quick, a minute here, a minute there. It's solid 20 minutes that pass there before us actually ticketing. The reason for that is to really have the proper response plan. Basically, when we pick up the phone and call this unfortunate on-call IT guy at 5:48, right, we want to be able to give him specific instructions as to what is it we're asking him to do. So having kind of guided step-by-step instructions for them. In this case, it's a pretty straightforward stuff. Device needs to be contained, reset the users basically, and then at your leisure, take that machine offline, probably reach it, right? So we ourselves are not logging into their system. Oh, go ahead.
No, sorry.
Yeah.
So you're 25 minutes to mitigation steps on the phone with the IT guy.
Pretty much, yeah.
He's sleeping. He's not responding to phone.
We're gonna call his
Then you better
boss.
fire him.
Yeah, so we're gonna call his boss, or we're gonna call somebody who works next to him. That's a big part of our onboarding, is making sure that all the people who need to be reached, primary, secondary, et cetera, are reachable, and we will reach them. Doesn't mean that it always works. Obviously, human nature sometimes you just cannot reach them. But this is where the ability to use some of the existing tooling that the customers have. So for example, if they have, let's say, CrowdStrike, right, as an EDR, or if they have an Arctic Wolf agent deployed on that machine. And in fact, if we have authorization from customer to do so, if that device is whitelisted for us to do containment without asking permission first, we will actually contain it. And so when we actually call this poor guy, we'll say, hey, this machine is offline. We've got a breather now, but this is what you need to do next, right? Go ahead and perform these tasks. You still need to sanitize the device. So the active response component is kind of an ever-evolving one. There's a lot of tools out there. So one of the big ones for us lately has been the ability to integrate with EDR vendors, right? You may or may not have Arctic Wolf agent deployed. People are reluctant to put, frankly, an extra agent on a device. But there's a healthy understanding that EDR is necessary. So there's some kind of endpoint protection tool running on the device. So being able to integrate with that and then drive containment action through API integration. So take that first step. That's key. We also have the ability to do that at the network level. So we have sensing capabilities. Some customers who are very sensitive to this idea of maybe they're understaffed or they realized how poorly they're protected on the wire, we can actually deploy in line. So basically sit below their firewalls, If we see control and command traffic, undisputably it's a bad thing, we can actually block it on our sensor. It's not an automated device, automatic process that happens on the box itself. Somebody triages it, they realize that this is something that needs to be actioned on, and then the first thing they do is they block that traffic, and then the rest of the response happens at the same time. So.
Okay. Yeah, just want to make sure that at least you acted on that IP because you know that it's a malicious IP, so you've already acted on it, and then now you're trying to remediate on the endpoint.
Right. As much as possible. I mean, fundamentally, we're not a managed service provider. Basically, we do not have logins to your AD or to your systems. And that's by design. It's a huge responsibility. And when you do this for thousands of customers, it's just, there's been a lot of stories of MSPs getting popped and then ruining their customers as a result of that, right?
You answered my next question, so that's good.
Yeah. But we do, like I said, we do not have access to your systems, but going back to what we do, like security reviews, one of the more popular ones, like Active Directory review, right? We will actually sit down with you and go through your Active Directory, do like a Zoom or whatever your tool of preference is, and kind of collaboratively go through that without us logging in. Same thing with firewalls, same thing with like group policy object, for example, on Windows, right? So this incident eventually gets resolved. Customer, by about 6:13 says, yep, we're all good, taking care of that. Thanks for waking me up. The time for high fives, really. But if you think about that, while the incident is addressed, and that's a big short-term win, long-term win, in our opinion, is what happens next. And what happens next is their named concierge security team, people that they know face-to-face, are going to reach out probably next or later in the day and say, hey, let's kind of step away from this problem and look at what actually happened here. So first of all, that initial access that you had there, it was out of the country. You do not need access out of the country for your systems, not over RDP at least, right? So this is like a very obvious fail. Fortunately, some of that could be mitigated by having a geofencing policy on the firewalls that they already are using, right? Multi-factor authentication. So selected system admin privileged systems were under MFA. They had an idea of rolling it out across the organization. They weren't doing it. Well, guess what? Now they have a very legitimate use case to go to their management and say, by the way, this just happened, right? Group policy object. This is one of those things where, just about any laptop at random, probably this one too, if I were to run PowerShell commands on it, I'll be able to do some nasty things with it, right? PowerShell should not be executable on most of the systems, and yet most GPO policies enable it. So having a follow-up step, if you would, where we would sit down with the customer and say, let's just benchmark your systems. This is your standard image. Let's see what it does. How is your GPO? Is your PowerShell configured? Let's look at all these other low-hanging fruit things that you can just push across the organization, right? So this is that idea of a security journey that we kind of push forward. Some more statistics. The one I like, the one we kind of witnessed there, that dwell time, if you're a customer of ours, you don't get to dwell. Hopefully we just catch it and within 30 minutes have a response action on it. This is timeline for the critical ones. Not every incident requires that type of tenacity. RSLA for non-critical, anything that doesn't satisfy, those crazy ransomware attacks or command control or data exfiltration detection, falls into the kind of the not critical bucket, and RSLA there is 2 hours, which is still pretty damn good. Inbound, if you see something, you woke up, you're logged in and you see something really like wonky going on, right? You just don't know. Pick up a phone, call us. You'll be talking to somebody live within 5 minutes. We'll be looking at our systems, your telemetry, gonna run it down together. If it's a nothing, great. Doesn't cost you anything. We don't have any like escalation limits. It's also expected that first 3 months, that's probably gonna likely to happen more often than not. But that's part of the journey, right? We don't charge anything extra. There's no a la carte pieces here. So last but not the least, this is what you can buy. This is what, so to speak, is on the truck. If any of this looks interesting to you guys, by all means, let us know. Let your KIS representatives know, and can have a longer, deeper conversation. Thank you.
Are we going to get a copy of this presentation?
I can send it to you. Yeah. Just let's talk after.
Got a prize to give away, Alex. Should we
Yeah.
do that?
Let's do it.
Can I just say,
Yes, ma'am.
I said it just because I wanted to see if there's anything new and different. I am a customer and a very happy one. But how you can include it?
I'm gonna ask a question, and the first person to yell the answer to me gets the prize.
That's
My
fair.
marketing person handed me this and said, "Give it away." So that's what I came up with. So
You're not gonna do like a toss of a bouquet?
no. But Alex alluded to this. And I think it's a really important point to reemphasize, and it should be a bit of a softball here. But what is the most vulnerable aspect of an organization's IT environment?
Users.
Human.
Good job. Everyone got it, but I had to give it away one way or another. But yeah, I mean, that speaks to the importance of our security awareness training and also the human component of what we provide, because a lot of tools, they don't have an in-depth view of what every employee is doing. So,
Right.
so yeah,
Um,
good job. Good answer.
To your question, perhaps, as to what's new and exciting. The first thing that's because I'm excited about it is the upcoming and actually already production integrations with like CrowdStrike, SentinelOne, and eventually DefenderATP to actually take containment action. So if you guys have those products right now, when you talk to your security team at Arctic Wolf, like ask about when that becomes a thing.
Part of it.
Yeah, that's I think is going to be a game changer for a lot of our customers, because that's actually where we can reach in and do something meaningful before we even pick up the phone.
Well, yeah, for my small house, stuff like that's great.
Nothing here. Can I get your contact?
Absolutely. Yeah.